Hi, so yesterday one of my students brought me this question that I kind of liked and wanted to share with all of you that was an interesting sort of flaw question. I wanted to share the question with you. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share the actual question and explanation with you because LSAT is a little bit of a stickler for their copyright. So instead, I've written an analogous question. We're going to go through it, work through it together. And then if you want, you can try out your skills on the real thing. Just in case you wanted to see all the answer choices before we go over it, you could pause it right here, try and solve it yourself if you want to. But if not, we're going to work through it. And if you're going question stem first, which we did today because I already spoiled things and told you it was a flaw question, then what I want you to take into the stimulus isn't, I don't want you to be like trying to apply some question type specific strategy. We're just going to know that this is an argument and there's something wrong with it, and we're going to try and figure out what. And we would do that with a flaw question, a strengthened question, a weakened question, a necessary assumption question, a sufficient assumption question, a parallel flaw question, all of them. If there's going to be a flawed argument, we just want to read the argument. We want to be trying to figure out how the evidence, how it all fits together, what it means, whether it supports the conclusion, and then figure out if there's something wrong with it. Okay, so let's start out. Medical data reveals that of therapy patients who were treated for 2 months or less, okay, 45% showed a major reduction in symptoms. Okay, so whenever there's any sort of interruption like that, I would read the sentence both with the interruption and without it. Okay, so we would read these therapy patients, they were treated for 2 months or less. Okay, so we understand there's less than or equal to 2 months that they're treated. Okay, and then the medical data reveals that these therapy patients, well, 45% of them showed a major reduction in symptoms. Okay, and now we're going to continue on. Well, they showed this major reduction in symptoms regardless of whether they were treated using cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic therapy. So what I'm taking away from that is this. All right, so if they're treated with cognitive behavioral therapy, they're going to show 45% will show a major reduction in symptoms. If they're treated with psychodynamic therapy, still 45% will show a major reduction in symptoms. Okay. All right, so I think we understand this sentence pretty well. We see what it's saying. Okay. Then of patients who receive therapy for longer than 2 months, okay, so now it's going to be, this was the less than or equal to 2 months. And now we're going to get longer than 2 months. Okay. So of patients who receive therapy for longer than 2 months, again, regardless of whether they receive cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic therapy, about 70% showed a major reduction in symptoms. Okay, so instead of 45%, if we give them more treatment, it's going to be 70%. Okay, so for the people who got more treatment, again, it's the same regardless of the therapy type that they're getting. 70% are improving, showing a major reduction in symptoms. All right, so now we have these two sentences figured out. We're going into the third one. So we got consequently. That's a conclusion indicator word, so we're probably going to get the conclusion next. So all this information that we have from before is probably going to be used to help support the conclusion. But again, there's going to be something wrong with it because we're in a flaw question. So consequently, the choice of whether to receive cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic therapy will not impact your chances of attaining a major reduction in symptoms. Okay, so first let's just be sort of generous to the argument, and then we'll start nitpicking. But it seems like what they're saying is, hey, look at all this evidence. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're treated with cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic therapy. Either way, the result's the same. Okay, so they're then saying you can get whichever one you want. But this is a flaw question, and there is something wrong with this. So I'll give you a second maybe to think about it, and then we're going to, we'll roll into like the things that are wrong with it. Okay, so the first thing, I think, just as a hint, here medical data just revealed this to us. It's kind of a little bit strange, right? Like we might think, if I were running a study or something, what I would do, and if I were trying to just see like which one of these worked better, I would randomly assign people either to cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic therapy. And then, then whichever one did better, I would say, oh, that's the better therapy. But what happened here wasn't random assignment. This is just, it seems like there were just people getting assigned to therapy out in the real world. And then we've got a hold of their medical data. So the question then is, why did some people get cognitive behavioral therapy and why did other people get the psychodynamic therapy? So one option could be like maybe like cognitive behavioral therapy is the really good stuff that like treats hard to cure problems. So then, and I'm just randomly picking one of them, it could be the opposite. But so maybe cognitive behavioral therapy gets the really tough problems, in which case and psychodynamic therapy gets kind of the easy patients. In which case getting a 45% reduction for the really tough patients might mean that like cognitive behavioral therapy is a lot better. And then psychodynamic therapy is getting 45%, sure, and 70%, but it's with the easy patients. So it's kind of not that impressive. So then if I were trying to pick like which one do I want to go to, if that were true, that hypothetical I just put in place, then I would go, I want the cognitive behavioral therapy. And it doesn't just have to be like one getting the hard patients and the other getting the easy patients. It could be maybe they have specific types of patients they get. So maybe if I have like obsessive compulsive disorder, we want cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not sure if this is true, by the way. Please don't take any of this as medical advice. I know nothing about this. But you don't have to have background knowledge for the LSAT. Okay. So maybe like we want cognitive behavioral therapy if we've got kind of obsessive compulsive disorder, or for psychodynamic therapy, maybe that's for things like depression or something. Okay. So like maybe different things go to different people. So then it would impact your chances of attaining a major reduction in symptoms if you went to the wrong one. So maybe this is just the outcome we get when people go to the right one. You know, maybe the doctors know what they're doing. They send people to the right one. And it really would matter if you got sent to the wrong one. Like your depression wouldn't be cured by the cognitive behavioral therapy, or your obsessive compulsive disorder wouldn't be cured by the psychodynamic therapy. And this seems to me to make a lot of sense. I think this is probably like true in the real world. Not that those are the specific cases, but just that different therapies are appropriate for different problems. Okay. All right. So we have sort of two flaws in mind, and now we just want to kind of try to fit them to the sort of abstract flaw-y language of the LSAT. So lots of times they'll start like something like this one does, presumes without providing justification. So if I'm making a prediction, I want presumes without providing justification that the same types of patients are assigned to both cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic therapy. So that's probably how I would structure it, so I could hit both those sorts of problems that I just listed. Okay. But then with that in mind, let's go through the answer choices. So we got presumes without providing justification that the efficacy of different therapeutic methods in reducing major symptoms cannot differ at all if their efficacy in bringing about any degree of symptom reduction does not differ. Okay, so that was kind of a mouthful. So let's just take it bit by bit. We got presumes without providing justification. Okay, that the efficacy of different therapeutic methods. Okay, so like how effective the methods are at reducing major symptoms cannot differ at all. Okay, can't be different at all if their efficacy in bringing about any degree of symptom reduction does not differ. Okay, so this one would be like if maybe cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic therapy, maybe we're told that their chances of bringing about symptom reduction were the same, but then like they left the door open for maybe one to be better at major symptom relief and the other to be better and for them to be equal at like general symptom relief, but maybe then one fixes more of the major problems. But that's not what happened here. We had major reduction in symptoms the whole way through. We had major reduction in symptoms again for the 70% number, and then our conclusion is also major reduction in symptoms. So it's not like the premises told us about symptoms overall and then the conclusions about major reduction in symptoms. It's just the same all the way through. All right, so we'll reject A. And then we've got B. So we got fails to provide information about which kinds of mental health conditions require treatment that is short as opposed to long. Okay, so fails to provide information about which kinds of mental health condition require treatment that is short as opposed to long. Well, short and long, we both know, like both leads us to the same, this was going so well, like fails to provide information about which kinds of mental health conditions. What we wanted to write was like assigned to cognitive behavioral therapy or are assigned to psychodynamic therapy. But instead we get this require treatment that's short as opposed to long. And we don't know, like it's 45% for both of them, regardless of like why the short people are assigned to short. And it's 70% for both types of therapy, regardless of why they're assigned to long. So this is already controlled for, like we've already been given both these sorts of information. This, is so close to being a good answer in the way it was starting out. Okay. Then we got overlooks the possibility that patients prefer one of the two types of therapy and may provide biased reports in favor of it. Oh, so that's interesting. I guess it's saying that somehow these numbers would be biased. So maybe like the cognitive, so we can sort of think about how this would work. Like if imagine like these results were the result of like biased reporting. Okay, then cognitive behavioral therapy, let's say like people are biased in favor of it. Like maybe it actually only helped 20%, but they're saying it helps 45%. So we've got to go see, like, is there evidence in this passage that like these are reports that could be biased? That's where this data came from. So medical data reveals that of therapy patients who were treated for 2 months or less, 45% showed a major reduction in symptom. So that doesn't sound to me like a report, right? I don't think that they actually, so like now if you tell me it's 45% showed a major reduction and then 70% showed a major reduction, I don't think their reports matter. So like if they're telling us behind the scenes, like it's actually, you know, for short term, maybe it's 90% of us say we were helped by cognitive behavioral therapy just because patients are biased in favor of it. Well, that's not going to be reflected in our data because we're looking at the actual, we're showing the reduction in symptoms. We're not asking people to report on whether they felt like they helped. All right. Then we got fails to indicate whether equal numbers of therapy patients in the sample received cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic therapy. So they're saying like maybe more people got one of these therapies than the other. And we don't care because the percent already controls for that. So like maybe it's 200 people got cognitive behavioral therapy. And so like maybe more of them end up getting treated and like 100 got physical or psychodynamic therapy. And so fewer of them got treated. Well, either way, the percent controls for the overall amount. Like we don't have to worry about like, so maybe like it's 200 people who got CBT got treated and 90 of them improved. And then like of the psychodynamic therapy, maybe it was 145 improved. So like we wouldn't want to compare these numbers like the 90 to the 45. The way we want to compare it that's fair to both of them is we'll compare it as a percent of the total patients assigned to them. Okay. So yeah, this is kind of, we don't care if it's equal numbers that were assigned to them because we were told the result in terms of percent. But if you just told me like the number of people it helped, then I absolutely would care how many people were assigned there. But they've already controlled for this in the data they gave us. Okay. So then we know E pretty much has to be right, but that's not how I would think of it on the real test because, you know, we could have incorrectly rejected one of these. So let's give E the exact same scrutiny we would any other choice. We got overlooks the possibility that cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic therapy each excel at treating patients with different therapeutic needs. Okay, and that's our sort of second theory that we'd had. It was that like maybe dynamic theory is good for the depression and cognitive behavioral therapy is good for the obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, so now if you have an obsessive compulsive disorder, you really want to get the CBT, and if you have the depression, you really want to get the psychodynamic therapy. And just because they bring you to the same success rate, if you're assigned to the right one, doesn't mean they'll bring you to the success rate if you're assigned to the wrong one. So now because of this, it can matter which you're assigned to, and therefore the conclusion that the choice of whether to receive your cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic therapy will not impact your chances of attaining a major reduction of symptoms isn't true. It will. You have to get the right one. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that question, and if you look at the real one, it's going to be physical therapy instead of psychological therapy. Have a nice day. Bye.